It is one of the worst feelings in the world, especially as a cyclist, when you are pushing yourself past your limits and you get that dreadful feeling in your legs. You know that as soon as it starts, it's creeping in. As soon as it gets there, the rest of the ride is ruined. So in today's video, we are going to talk about why cramps happen, what the research says, and how you can prevent them, especially if you're a cyclist like me who doesn't have that much time to train, maybe 4, maximum 5 hours a week. We'll talk about nutrition strategies, training tips, and a few personal stories. My name is Ely. I'm a strength coach for cyclists. Let's dive in. So my first experience with cramping was actually on my first group ride. Now, if you don't know, I came from a bodybuilding background. And so though I was very fit, routinely squatting 315 pounds, bench pressing 225 pounds, looked muscular, the kind of training that comes with bodybuilding is very different than the kind of training that comes with cycling. And the adaptations that you get from both are very different as well. So just because I had this bodybuilding kind of training experience does not mean automatically that it makes me a strong cyclist with a large capacity to do work for a long period of time. Thus, on my first group ride, when I was only at that time doing solo rides of around 30 kilometers, my first group ride was a 70-kilometer ride. Around 50 kilometers in, the cramps began. It sucked. And it just kept on getting worse from there. I think the saying that the people who experience cramps are the people who experience cramps is very true. If you've experienced cramps in the past, you're more likely to experience cramps again in the future. If you haven't experienced cramps in the past, you're less likely to experience it. So there's actually two theories as to why cramps happen. And the honest truth is there's a lot of research being done into it, and the mechanisms behind why they happen still isn't fully understood. But the two theories are neuromuscular fatigue and dehydration/electrolyte imbalance. I lean a little bit more towards the neuromuscular fatigue side of things, and I'll explain why. What is neuromuscular fatigue? Essentially, it is when your muscle is overworked. And so there are typically signals that happen between muscles that allow it to contract and relax. Muscles that excite it and muscles that inhibit it. Fatigue causes those exciting signals to become overactive and the inhibiting signals to become less active, which essentially locks the muscle into a cramp. Now, this theory is also supported by the fact that cramps typically happen after you push way beyond your comfort zone. So whether it be a hard race or the end of a long group ride or the end of just a really long and hard ride, that's when you start feeling the cramps. It's because of that fatigue. Now, the good thing is, of course, as you would already know, if you do cramp, stretching that muscle helps relieve it temporarily. And it actually restores that inhibitory signal. The other cause, the other theory for why cramps happen is the dehydration and electrolyte route. This is a more traditional view of cramps. It's the idea, when you're dehydrated, you lose sodium, you lose potassium, magnesium, calcium, which disturbs muscle function. It reduces your blood volume and nerve endings become hyperexcitable, and essentially just low electrolyte levels contribute to hyperexcitability, aka the muscle contracting and not relaxing. And this is actually studies even from dating as far back as from the 1930s showing that athletes who had severe salt depletion, probably by sweating, had more cramps and weaknesses. But there's something to be said here. Many athletes, such as myself, manage our hydration really well. We're getting the electrolytes, we're on top of water and fluid intake. We hydrate well the night before, we hydrate well during the ride, and we still cramp. So the research is saying that yes, dehydration makes cramps more likely, but it is not the underlying trigger. And the underlying trigger is fatigue. Now, when you take that over fatigue and you pair it with dehydration and electrolyte imbalance, it's just the perfect cocktail for cramps. So if you are on top of your hydration and on top of your electrolytes, it may make cramping less likely, but it doesn't take it away 100%. A fatigue on a ride, and the reason you cramp is when you push beyond your body's current adapted fitness. In other words, you're doing beyond what you are already adapted to. The thing is, that's kind of necessary in order to improve. We constantly have to progressively overload, progressively make our training harder in order to improve, in order to adapt to new things. And that's why cramping can be a little bit tricky to deal with. In training, it's easier because you're able to dial back the intensity once those cramps do start. But, at a race or a group ride, when you're still 40 kilometers, 50 kilometers from home and you're starting to cramp, it kind of sucks. So let's just put it plainly. Your ability to resist cramping is closely tied to your fitness and your fatigue. If you don't know what those numbers are, I'll link those up over here to a video I made about explaining fitness and fatigue really simply. But it is very closely linked to your current fitness, your conditioning. If you push beyond what your body is able to handle and beyond what your muscles, what your legs are currently adapted to, you're far more likely to cramp. So for example, if you've only, like me back in the past, was only doing 1 hour rides, and then I hop into my my first 2.5 hour ride, far more likely to cramp. This happened to me multiple times, by the way. So for example, another event that I did, I was training at that time a lot more. I had a lot more time to train because business was slower. So I was doing routinely 3-hour rides, 90 kilometers, 100-kilometer rides, and I was adapted to that. But then I joined a race that was a 200-kilometer race. In essence, my body was adapted to doing 100-kilometer rides. The race was double that. And so cramps happened. The tricky part is, especially for me and the audience that we work with, and I'll put it plainly, when you want to do 3, 4, 5-hour rides and you're only training 3 or 4 or 5 hours a week because that's all you have, for example, with me as a CEO, taking care of a baby as in taking care of a newborn, being a father and a husband, traveling. Already time is very limited, so we don't have that much training volume. Our bodies are not adapted to these longer efforts. Muscles get tired sooner and can't handle long, intense efforts that we were once used to. And that's tricky. However, there are some things that we can do in order to fortify our bodies against cramping. And the thing I want to stress here is not training haphazardly, but training with leverage, training with intention, training smart and efficiently. The goal is, especially if you're like me, you're a CEO or an entrepreneur or some kind of high performer, doctor, lawyer, whatever it is, or you have kids, or you're just super busy and you don't have a lot of the time to train. The goal here is to maximize the return on investment on the limited time to train that we do have. We're not like pro riders who have very high volumes of time to train, or like those teenagers who are just spending 12, 15, 20 hours on the bike every single week. They essentially bulletproof themselves against cramping because they have that kind of time available. And if you had that kind of time available, I would tell you, go ahead and use it, especially if you want to bulletproof yourself against cramping. But for us as time crunched cyclists, we need to still be able to borrow these effective techniques, but on a smaller scale. Let's start with some of the most important things that we're doing. Number one, obviously, is training. If you're not going to train, you're not going to improve, you're not going to allow your body to adapt for what you need it to adapt to, and you're going to cramp on every group ride, every time you push yourself past your comfort zone. I already hear the excuses, oh, I don't have a lot of time a week to train. I get it, neither do I, but still doing it. It's not about training longer or more miles in the saddle. And maybe that is going to be a huge benefit because the people who do have more miles in the saddle and are able to log those are fortifying their body against cramping. But when training hours are limited, we have to maximize those training hours. You see, there's a reason that my client Ron was able to increase his FTP by 35, 40 watts in just 4 hours a week. Or my client Safwan was able to do the same thing, 55 watts, 10 pounds down in just 9 weeks. You have to train smarter. Now, past that, there is merit to doing long rides if you have them available, if you have that kind of time available. And not all of us do. So this is not a make it or break it. We're still able to reduce the likelihood of cramping with all the other things that we have in here, with all the other steps and techniques. But if you have the time available, training for the durations and intensities that cause your cramps is crucial. So for example, if you're doing 3-hour rides with the group and that 3-hour mark is where you start cramping, if you're able to get a 3-hour ride in by yourself, you'll be much less likely to cramp. Now, on top of that, if you can't get a 3-hour ride in, especially like an outdoor 3-hour ride in, then training more efficiently will help. So for example, as we all know, training an hour on the indoor trainer feels like training 3 hours outside. I'm not saying it's the equivalent, but it feels like it sometimes. And it's because you don't have to stop pedaling. Outside, you're constantly stopping. There's traffic lights, there's stop signs. If you're in, a group, you're stopping to pedal just to draft a little bit and catch up. Whereas when you're on the trainer, it's a much more efficient workout. Essentially, we want to expose our body to the neuromuscular demands that we would need in these efforts that cause us to cramp in the first place. So if the volume is low, keep the intensity high. Another thing that you would need to do is strength training. Now, this is part of our leverage training protocol that we talk about here, because we take cycling, strength training, and nutrition and pair them into a beautiful trinity that allows you to perform your best while training less on the bike. And here's the reason why strength training is so important. Strength training, if done correctly, does not just make you, stronger and your physique nicer, but increases performance, increases endurance, increases your FTP, allows you to hold positions that are more aggressive on the bike, meaning you can go faster for less energy. It increases your training economy, neuromuscular strength, fatigue resistance, helps correct muscle imbalances, and does a host of other things. A lot of the time cyclists cramp in the quad is because of a muscle imbalance. Now, quads are obviously going to be a very dominant group on the bike, but if your quads are taking most of the load while your glutes are not, then there's some kind of imbalance there. And that's also stressing the importance of a bike fit. So if you haven't seen a reputable bike fitter, go ahead and see one, because they will make sure that you are in the proper positions that are going to reduce those kinds of cramps. Treat strength training as cramp proofing insurance. Essentially, to put it really simply, stronger muscles tolerate bigger loads. And with strength training comes plyometrics and breath work as well. It's not just going and lifting heavy and doing the squats and doing the the lunges and the deadlifts, but it also comes with breath work and learning how to utilize the breath in order to achieve peak performance in the exercises, but also on the bike. Learning how to truly expand the rib cage laterally, learning how to brace the core to create intra-abdominal pressure. And then there's the plyometric side of things, learning how to create quick explosive movements that train the nervous system, that train the proprioceptors to handle high intensity contractions. So to visualize this, what let's say an example work week would look like. You have, let's say, 2 1-hour rides on the bike every single week. You can split those up into 2. So maybe you have a VO2 max workout on one day and a threshold workout or a anaerobic intervals workout on another day. 1 hour. 2 strength training sessions a week. Let's say 30 to 45 minutes each, with breath work, dynamic warm-up, the actual bulk of the heavy lifting, which isn't always heavy, by the way, plyometrics, and a solid stretch at the end. And then maybe you have 1, maximum 2, if you have the time, longer rides. So we're talking like 90 minutes or 2 hours on the bike. And in this case, you ride in either zone 2 or zone 3, depending on the time that you have. And if you really want to make this as efficient as possible, do it on the trainer as well. But what we really are stressing here, because we have such limited time to train, is quality over quantity. Now, here's the fun part, the nutrition and supplementation and hydration. So obviously, stay hydrated, drink lots of water, maintain the fluids that you are losing by replacing them quickly, and include electrolytes in there as well, because dehydration will lead to an increased likelihood of cramping. So electrolytes here could include, sodium, magnesium, potassium, and calcium. But sodium here is the priority, especially if you are sweating a lot. What else I would do personally is maybe even have some kind of carb mix in there as well, because carbs are your best friends on high intensity rides and even longer rides. Even if you're doing it in zone 2, you are still using carbs as fuel. You're using fat, yes, but you're using carbs as well. Your body doesn't just switch from one to another using 100% of carbs and 100% fats. It's not really like that. Everything is dynamic. So make sure you had enough food beforehand. Make sure you're ingesting carbs during the rides, whether it be liquid carbs, whether it be gels, whether it be food. And make sure you have enough glycogen in the muscles in order to help you. On top of that, taking something like magnesium, especially magnesium glycinate, doesn't just help you sleep better, but a lot of studies are showing that it also helps to significantly reduce cramping. So there was a 2022 study that showed endurance runners who drank a magnesium-rich electrolyte beverage during the half marathon had significantly less cramps. 21% of those athletes cramped versus the 46% of athletes who cramped when they only drank water. And then there's like the other stuff, like some people take Tums, which is calcium carbonate. Others do the pickle juice method. I'm not a big fan.
I just hate pickles in general.
Make sure you're recovering as well, because neuromuscular fatigue doesn't just mean one ride. It could be the fact that you did several hard rides that day before, didn't take any break, and then came into another hard ride. So the entire routine and training load and recovery is required to understand how this works. Train smart, fuel aggressively, hydrate well, use supplements strategically, and you'll be able to minimize, maybe, if you do it well, fully bulletproof yourself against cramping. So if you are a high-performing cyclist who wants to train smarter, train with leverage, take strength training, cycling, and nutrition, and take it all together and put it into your life, I'll link the video that explains exactly how we do that with our athletes and riders purpose here. And as always, my friends, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time.